The brightness wars have been going on in the TV industry for years, but is it finally time to crown a winner? Hi, I'm Ben from RTINGS.com, and today we're reviewing the highly anticipated TCL X11L. This 4K TV advertises a whopping 10,000 nits of peak brightness, thousands of dimming zones, and offers a ton of modern features for gamers and movie fans alike. This is the first 2026 model we've reviewed, so if you want to stay up to date with all the new TVs coming out this year, be sure to subscribe. It sits at the top of TCL's TV lineup, above the TCL RM9L and the QM8L. It supports 144Hz at 4K, and like many TCL models, you can game at 288Hz in either 1080p or 1440p. Unlike those models, it uses super quantum dot technology, which is meant to take color vibrancy to the next level. So, do all these impressive specs actually result in a TV that's worth buying? Or should you save some cash and get either a cheaper Mini LED model or a flagship OLED instead? Let's get into it. The TCL X11L is available at multiple retailers and comes in 3 different sizes: 75 inches, 85, and 98. So it's really aimed at enthusiasts shopping for something on the bigger side. It's an expensive TV, but it looks premium and stylish. It has incredibly thin bezels that are pretty much unnoticeable when watching TV, and the copper accents are a very nice touch. Behind the stylish bottom grille is a built-in soundbar that looks quite nice, but looks don't always translate to performance. More on that later. We bought and tested the 85-inch model, but all sizes share the same core features, and our results should be mostly valid for the 75 and 98-inch sizes. However, there are some subtle differences worth noting. The 75-inch has 11,520 dimming zones, the 85 has 14,400, and the 98 has over 20,000. However, it's common for zone counts to increase as the size of the TV does, so we expect incredibly similar local dimming performance across all 3 sizes. The 2 largest sizes are advertised to reach 10,000 nits of peak brightness, while the 75-inch is supposed to only reach a measly 9,000 nits. That was sarcasm. 9,000 nits is still insane. So who is the TV really meant for? Its price tag, specs, and lack of smaller sizes suggest that it's aimed at enthusiasts. However, the 75-inch and 85-inch models are more expensive than flagship OLEDs like the LG G5 and Samsung S95F that enthusiasts typically gravitate towards. That would lead most people to believe that it positions itself as one of the best TVs on the market. So how does it perform? It's no secret that this is one of, if not the brightest TVs ever made. This is the part where we make a joke about grabbing your sunglasses, but that doesn't even seem appropriate here. So grab your welder goggles instead? For real, this TV is so bright that we couldn't use our trusty CR100 colorimeter and instead had to opt for our CR250 spectroradiometer for brightness measurements. When a TV advertises 10,000 nits of peak brightness, it's hard to believe. Well, this TV actually exceeds TCL's advertised brightness. In SDR, the TV hits over 11,000 nits with a 2% window. Like many TVs, its peak brightness drops as window sizes become larger, but it still hits over 800 nits full screen. In our real scene SDR test, it reaches over 1600 nits. Suffice to say, this TV easily overcomes glare in even the brightest environments. Most people won't be using this model at max brightness in SDR, but what about HDR, where content typically dictates how bright the TV gets? The TV's HDR brightness measurements are nearly identical to SDR, so it hits around 11,000 nits with a 2% window and 800 nits with a full screen one. This is one of the few TVs on the market that can actually display most highlights in HDR content mastered at 4,000 nits, so it rarely has to rely on tone mapping. Here's the catch: most HDR content is mastered at 1,000 nits, and content mastered at 4,000 nits is quite rare. Having a TV that pumps out 10,000 nits sounds great and all, but if you're striving for accuracy, a great deal of that brightness will go to waste. You might be thinking about buying this TV to watch movies in a way that respects the filmmaker's intent, since it doesn't need to do much tone mapping with the vast majority of HDR movies and shows. If that's what you're aiming for, you're better off setting the brightness to 50 out of 100, since the TV is more accurate that way. With the TV's brightness set to 100 out of 100 using the HDR filmmaker mode, the X11L doesn't stay true to the intended brightness level of content. It's not bad on the low end, but even the midtones are too bright. As we get into highlight territory, we can see that the TV drastically overbrightens highlights, regardless of the mastering level of the content. For example, highlights that should be 4,000 nits are pushed closer to 10,000 nits, resulting in an image that doesn't follow the filmmaker's intent. Some people might like this added brightness, but anyone who cares about accuracy will be disappointed. Luckily, you can set your brightness to 50 out of 100 and you're left with an image that stays much closer to what the filmmaker intended. You can also set your brightness to maximum, but adjust the peak brightness setting to low and get similarly accurate brightness in HDR. If you're in a bright room and care more about visibility than accuracy, you can set the brightness to maximum, enable dynamic tone mapping, or even switch to a brighter, less accurate picture mode to help overcome glare. If you're in a dark room and care about accuracy, you're best off limiting the amount of brightness the TV produces. If you take the TV's insane brightness capabilities and combine that with the new super quantum dot technology, you should get unrivaled levels of color volume, right? Well, kind of. In SDR, the TV covers just under 84% of the super wide BT 2020 color space, which is impressive. When a TV covers that much of BT 2020, it should automatically mean that it covers the entirety of the more commonly used DCI P3 color space. But that isn't the case here. We're not entirely sure why, but for some reason the TV only covers just under 90% of the DCI P3 color space in SDR, struggling with the brighter colors. That's still great, but we were expecting full coverage here like you get on QD OLEDs such as the Samsung S95F. In HDR, it's a similar story. The TV covers 69% of the BT 2020 color space at 10,000 nits, which is the highest we've ever measured. However, the TV only covers 83% of the commonly used DCI P3 color space at 1,000 nits, so it can't fully display the full range of colors in most HDR content. 83% is still quite good, but it pales in comparison to the full coverage you get from QD OLEDs and RGB tandem OLEDs. Still, its color volume in SDR and HDR is very impressive, and this TV can absolutely blast colors at high levels of brightness, so you don't need to worry about colors looking washed out. When you're buying a TV this pricey, you can probably expect top-tier color accuracy out of the box. Unfortunately, that's not really the case here. In SDR, the TV's accuracy is mediocre. Its white balance and gamma are noticeably off, and the entire image is too warm. Colors still look pretty accurate, but there are errors in lighter colors that will bother enthusiasts. It's a similar story in HDR. The color temperature is close to the industry standard 6500 Kelvin, but there are standard luminance and color errors. If you're buying a TV this expensive, spending a few $100 on calibration doesn't seem that bad at all. Sadly, adjustments to blues don't work properly across all stimulus levels, which makes it impossible to fully calibrate the TV to the reference level. This is most likely a software issue, but if you have your own calibration equipment or plan to pay a professional, it might be worth waiting to see if TCL fixes this. A lot of the discussion around the X11L has been about brightness, but who really cares about brightness if a TV doesn't have solid black levels? TCL packed a lot of zones in this model, which should lead to incredible local dimming if the TV also has a great dimming algorithm under the hood. That's exactly the result here, as the TV has a super high contrast ratio. Although blacks aren't as inky as they are in OLED models, they're still impressively deep and bold. On top of that, haloing is kept to a bare minimum, so you rarely notice any glow around subtitles and highlights. The local dimming on this TV rivals the Sony BRAVIA 9, which has been the undisputed champion for over a year when it comes to zone precision on Mini LED models. Dark scenes look amazing on this TV, and its high contrast ratio leads to impressive looking HDR. Overall, black levels still aren't quite at the level of OLEDs, but this is about as close as you can get. When you're watching high quality 4K content, you're going to have no problems at all with compatibility. The X11L supports the typical HDR10, but also supports HDR10 Plus and the popular Dolby Vision format. On top of that, TCL promises a future firmware update that will add Dolby Vision too. The TV also passes through all Dolby and DTS audio formats, so whether you're watching a show on Netflix or your favorite movie on 4K Blu-ray, your bases are covered. Not only does this TV excel when it comes to watching content, but it also offers a lot for gamers. It's the first TCL TV to offer 4 HDMI 2.1 ports, each capable of 4K at 144Hz or 1080p and 1440p at 288Hz. On top of that, it supports G-Sync, FreeSync, and HDMI 4M VRR, so you're totally covered regardless of the console or GPU you own. Unfortunately, VRR doesn't work properly when the TV is receiving a 60Hz signal, since there's visible screen tearing. Luckily, this isn't a big deal with most sources since the Series X, PS5, and most modern gaming PCs can handshake at a minimum of 120 Hz. The TV's input lag is a few milliseconds higher than many other models at all refresh rates, but it's still low enough that the TV isn't adding any big delay between your inputs and the action on screen. Being that this is an LED model, you're not going to get the crystal clear motion that OLED displays provide, but response times are actually pretty good here for an LED TV. Whether you're gaming in 60 Hz, 120 Hz, or 144 Hz, you're still going to see some motion blur, especially in fast-paced titles, but pixel transitions are quick enough that motion blur isn't a major detractor. The X11L uses a new type of VA panel known as WHVA 2.0, which is designed to improve viewing angles while retaining deep blacks. The viewing angle is decently wide for an LED model, but there's still a loss of color saturation and brightness at moderate angles. As you move further off-center, blacks do become raised and the overall picture quality drops, so it's still not great for very wide seating arrangements. Most TV speakers sound bad, but there are a few models in the wild that do sound pretty good. With the inclusion of a built-in soundbar on the X11L, you might be expecting good enough sound that allows you to ditch your soundbar. I'm sorry to say, but this TV doesn't sound good at all. The speakers aren't very loud, there's almost no bass, and the sound profile is unbalanced. The copper grille at the bottom of the TV is very stylish, but the speakers behind it don't sound nearly as good as it looks. If you're considering this TV, there's probably at least a couple other models you're looking into, so let's see how the X11L compares to some of its competition. The Sony BRAVIA 9 has been at the top of the Mini LED mountain for a while now, and the X11L really does give it a run for its money. Even though the BRAVIA 9 is bright, it doesn't hold a candle, pun intended, to the X11L's eye-searing brightness. However, like we discussed before, the brightness of most HDR content falls within the BRAVIA 9's capabilities. Although the X11L's color volume is top tier, the BRAVIA 9 is still a very colorful TV, and it offers near reference level accuracy straight out of the box. TCL also can't quite match the industry-leading processing that Sony provides. If you want a refined image that respects the filmmaker's intent, the BRAVIA 9 is the way to go. If you want insane specs, the X11 is the better choice. Since the X11L is more expensive than any flagship OLED from 2025, it's very possible you're trying to decide between the X11L and a TV like the Samsung S95F. Even though the X11L is essentially the pinnacle of Mini LED TVs, it still doesn't provide the same level of overall image quality as a QD OLED. Although the X11L displays super deep blacks with almost no haloing, it still doesn't match the perfect inky blacks you get from the S95F. The X11L easily beats the S95F's brightness, but the S95F can still fully display most highlights in HDR content. Gamers will likely prefer the clear motion on the S95F, and its QD OLED panel comes close to matching the colors that the super quantum dots on the X11L provide. A lot of this comparison applies to any flagship OLED, and they all offer better image quality and performance overall. So who is the X11L really made for, and when is it actually worth buying? As great as this TV is, it's hard to widely recommend if you're shopping for a 75-inch or 85-inch model. Outside of its insane brightness, there isn't much about this that makes it worth significantly more money than the Sony BRAVIA 9 or a flagship OLED in that size range. Most people are better off saving thousands of dollars by going with one of those models instead. However, the 98-inch model is a very enticing option if you're shopping for a massive screen, since there's much less competition in that size range. The 97-inch LG G5 is the only OLED currently available in that size, but it costs anywhere between $20,000 to $25,000 depending on if it's on sale or not. If that's too expensive for you, but you still want a massive high-end TV for your home, the X11L fits that bill. It's still $10,000, but you're getting one of the best TVs on the market and arguably the best non-OLED display you can buy. That's it for our review of the TCL X11L. What do you think? Are you happy with this TV's insane brightness, or would you want something more refined overall, like the Sony BRAVIA 9 or an OLED like the Samsung S95F? Let us know. If you want to learn more, check out our written review in the description below.